Kings fans, chime in on the Four Nations Faceoff and more on this Kings fan feedback edition of Locked On LA Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Kings fans, welcome to Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On LA Kings your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. I'm Eddie Garcia, your host of Locked On LA Kings. I've worked in sports media for the past 30 years. Also co-host of the Puck Podcast, a weekly NHL review show that's been putting out content for the past 18 years, and a passionate LA Kings fan for over 30 years. It is a Kings fan feedback Friday, your chance to sound off, critique, praise, complain, celebrate our beloved Los Angeles Kings. We do it every Friday, off-season, regular season, postseason, and we've got a lot of emails to get to this week, so let's not waste any time and let's get right into it. We also, in addition to some emails, we have a couple of posts from YouTube and a message from X we're going to share as well. But let's begin with the hot topic in the hockey world and maybe even in the sports world, and that is the conclusion of the Four Nations Faceoff. And Brian in Tampa is the first to check in, and he says, I had zero interest in the Four Nations Faceoff going in, but the Sweden-Finland overtime game and the insane USA-Canada battle made me convert. The video of the three fights in the first 9 seconds of US-Canada was going viral all over social media. No all-star game or skills competition could have created this kind of excitement for the NHL. The icing on the cake was the rematch of the USA and Canada in the final. Go Kings, go. And that was Brian in Tampa. The ratings for the hockey game on ESPN in the United States, 9.25 million people tuned in the U.S., 6.5 million in Canada. It's the most watched non-Olympic hockey game ever in the United States. So obviously, as I mentioned the other night at the conclusion of the game when we did our episode, it was a great day for hockey. It was a great event. The championship game was great. And again, even for people who weren't going into it necessarily all that excited, I think that they became excited about it. And I think a lot of non-hockey fans were at least curious to check it out. So the Four Nations Faceoff was without question a huge success for the NHL and the NHLPA. We'll see if this really has any significant impact on average sports fans now being more interested in hockey or not. But in the end, even if it isn't, again, there's nothing bad that's coming out of the Four Nations Faceoff. At least if it was just kind of a one-off, if it was just a one great night or one great couple of weeks of hockey, then that's still a positive for the NHL and for the players. Dan in San Dimas checks in. He says, I didn't think I would like the Four Nations Faceoff because it's mid-season and really about the money. I was wrong. I loved it. How can they build on this and make it better? I have a few ideas. Make the regular season shorter, 74 or 76 games, add 2 more teams, Russia and a European team. Same format as this year, round robin with games in both the US and Canada. Keep them regional, similar time zones to help with the travel. Have a championship Saturday or Sunday, championship and a consolation 3rd, 4th place game, and have prize money for the top 3 teams. Everyday listener, you walk with me and my dog daily. And that was Dan in San Dimas. Well, Dan, thanks for taking me along on your dog walks. I appreciate that. I obviously loved it too. You did mention it's about money, and we may not like to think about that as often as we probably should. And that's why there's no way the NHL owners are going to cut down on the regular season by 6 or 8 games. It's just not going to happen. They're not going to let go of that revenue. Now, there will be the Olympics next year. There's going to be a World Cup of Hockey in 2028. And there's an all-star game next season, which now I think seems a bit anticlimactic, but they've already committed to having that in Long Island, New York. There have been some other people floating out other possible ideas in place of maybe an all-star game, having other different kind of international events. One of them I saw was a Summit Series idea. This was something they did back in the day, I think in the 70s, where the U.S. and Canada would play a best of 7 game series. Obviously, that would be very intriguing for fans of the U.S. and Canada. You're leaving out a lot of players, though, in the mix with that. But there have been some other ideas. But I do think the NHL has to be careful here because there's also overdoing things. And I get the excitement around it. I get the success, but this does remind me a little bit of the Winter Classic. When they first started the Winter Classic, it was one game, New Year's Day. That was it. It made it unique. It made it special. Everybody was tuning in for that one game, but it was really successful. And so, of course, they had to try and do more. And then you had like a Winter Classic, but then you had like 2 other Stadium Series games. And then they threw like a Heritage Classic game up in Canada in the mix as well. And it's now no longer, the Winter Classic now no longer really feels special like it once did. So I think there is also maybe a cautionary tale there to not overdo it, not oversaturate it, and make it still a special event every other year is not necessarily the worst idea either. Scott in Simi Valley checks in. He says, congrats to Drew on the Four Nations win. I enjoyed watching Juice and was very impressed with all the players and the whole tournament. To me, though, not having players like Leon Draisaitl and Alexander Ovechkin in the tournament is a major drawback, all politics aside. Besides, playing against Russia would have only increased the interest level and the intensity level as well. I'm a bit late, but I wanted to mention how lucky we are to having Carlin Baith in the world of Kings hockey. Her smile and enthusiasm are unmatched, and I hope to see Carlin on your show more often. She mentioned her mother's maiden name was Carr, any relation to former King Gene Carr. Frank Baith, who is Carlin's father, is probably a very interesting guy to talk hockey with as well. He was in some barn burner brawls with the Kings in the late 70s. The times were different back then. Thanks as always for the great content. And again, that was from Scott in Simi Valley. I'm pretty sure, Scott, if Carlin was related to former King Gene Carr, she would have mentioned it. So I don't think so. But from what I've read, you're talking about Russia being a part of this and them being excluded. From what I've read, they're not expected to be a part of the Olympics next year in Italy because of the war with Ukraine. I'm sure the NHL would love to have Alexander Ovechkin and Team Russia involved in the World Cup of Hockey in 2028. Who knows what kind of developments will happen in the world between now and then. But it is worth pointing out that the Olympics are governed by the IIHF, the International Ice Hockey Federation. The World Cup of Hockey is not. That's an NHL event. So they don't have any say in that. So we'll see. We'll have to see how it works out. Danny in Toronto checks in. He says, great episodes this week. Prospects and the Alexandra Grace shows were great. Funny enough, my 2 daughters are huge Kings fans. My oldest daughter is a Kempe fan because he is cute. And my youngest is a Doughty fan because we met him here in Toronto at a charity event. You must know that Canadians don't normally boo. Actually, we never boo. We don't want to be annexed, so it's getting to be sensitive. I'm sure this will blow over. I have to believe there's no other country in the world America would rather be neighbors with than Canada. And that was Danny in Toronto. Yeah, Danny, he's obviously referring to the Canadian fans booing the U.S. anthem when the games were in Montreal. And then, of course, the fans in Boston did the same to the Canadian anthem when the games moved to the United States. And I've mentioned I'm not a fan of booing the anthems. I understand their bad feelings. I'm not a very political person. I'm not saying that I'm naive as to what's going on in the world, but, I'm a lover of sports, and I'm a lover of sports bringing people together. And when sports is kind of, in a sense, dividing people, it's a pretty big bummer to me. Although I get it. I mean, look, part of the reason I think there was a big attraction to these types of events, it is country versus country, and there's patriotism involved and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, look, I think most rational people view Canada as a wonderful neighbor, and hopefully that's not going to change ever. This comes from Andy in Guelph, Ontario. He says, I hope you enjoyed watching the Four Nations and those Canada versus U.S. matchups. It's unfortunate to hear any anthem disrespected regardless of one's political views or tensions. In the end, I was just so pleased to watch 2 passionate countries competing for pride and the love of the game. I thought Drew Doughty looked better as the tournament progressed, and I see his participation as a huge help for the Kings. Essentially, this, along with his previous 6 games, acted as his training camp. Very excited to see what he does the rest of the season. I've read articles about Alex Tuch and a potential trade. What do you think, and what would you part with to get him? Keep up the great work. And again, that was Andy in Ontario. Yeah, I mentioned it on Thursday's show. I totally agree with you. I think that Drew Doughty played really well in the tournament. And I think this can only help him as he gets back to the Kings and is now playing at a very high level. I did mention the Alex Tuch thing in an episode earlier this week when we kind of previewed or I guess kind of give a profile on him, a player profile. I would love to get Alex Tuck on the Kings. What is it going to take? I'm not exactly sure what the Sabres are looking. I'm not sure what the competition is for him. And for what it's worth, Dave Pagnotta from the fourth period, I saw reported that the Sabres are not looking to trade him. But then again, it's not like he's some untouchable guy. I mean, if the price is right, they'll definitely look to trade him. I keep hearing Jordan Spence's name being mentioned as someone that's going to be moved if the Kings make a trade. So we'll see. Coming up, we have some international Kings fans checking in. That and more on this edition of Locked On LA Kings. The NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, and even if you miss the opening tip-off and you want to be in on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. FanDuel's live betting feature keeps you engaged in every moment of the excitement, whether it's backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three-pointer. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Let's continue with your emails, and this comes from Tom, and he is in Australia, New South Wales, and the city he is from is Jindabyne, I think. Jindabyne. Jindabyne? I hope I was close. Tom says, I've been a Kings fan since March of 2012, a good year to start following the team. I went to my first ever NHL game at Staples Center to see the King Sharks, and I've been hooked ever since. I try to watch most games live or on replay after work. I've only started listening to this show this year, and I've become a daily listener. Well, you know what that makes you, Tom? An everydayer. He says, I love the content and the insight into potential trades. I'll be in the U.S. in 2 weeks' time for the NRL, Australian Rugby League, in Vegas to watch my favorite footy team, the Cronulla Sharks. Cronulla. Cronulla Sharks? Oh, boy. He says, I'll also be attending the Kings Blues game on March 5th. Love the podcast. Keep up the good work. Go Kings go, and up Cronulla. P.S. I have a Kings themed tattoo, and my dog's name is Kopi. And that was from Tom in Australia. Well, Tom, good day. Thanks for checking in. Great to hear from you. Like you, my first real season following the Kings was when they went to the Stanley Cup. That was in '93. Unfortunately, they didn't win in the final, but I got hooked on that ever since. I'm not sure I'll be out there at that Kings Blues game, but if I do, it'd be great to meet up with you. Either way, hope you have a great trip. Hope you see a Kings win. As for your dog, I'm sure there are a lot of Kings fans out there who have pets that are named Kopi and Dewey. Our latest dog is named Herbie, and that's my wife's name, named after LA Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert. So very cool. And speaking of very cool, we got an email from Jakub in Slovakia. He says, I'm an everyday listener. Also makes you an everydayer. He says, I've been planning to send an email for a fan feedback show for a long time, but I never amassed enough courage to do so. Now I feel it's the right time to say hello, at least. I live in Bratislava, capital city in the region, and I was born in the early 90s. Growing up in a post-communist country was interesting because everything from the Western world was new. And the biggest connection to the U.S. and Canada was, of course, ice hockey. There were some players before the fall of the Iron Curtain, like Peter and Anton Stastny, but now there was a new generation of players who were drafted and were leaving for the NHL. So through them, I was able to get to know the teams and the players from around the league. I don't know how many Kings fans there are in Slovakia or how many there were in the late 90s and early 2000s, but it makes sense. Two Slovaks, Lubomir Breznovsky and Ziggy Palffy, were on the LA Kings quarter-century teams, and there were a few others playing on the team like Josef Stumpel, Michael Handzus, Pavel Demitra, and Marian Gaborik, who helped the Kings win the Cup in 2014. I've always liked the Kings, but I can't talk about becoming a real fan until the first Cup run in 2012. In 2019, I moved to Calgary, and one of my longtime dreams came true when I went to see our Kings play for the first time. I almost cried. It was such a wonderful experience. And a few shows back, you talked about how you like to watch the Flames games because of Dewey against Matthew Tkachuk. I was at the second game in the 2019-20 season where Dewey scored the game winner in overtime against Calgary. I did see them one more time in Calgary, but they lost that game. Still, it was fantastic. Thanks for doing a great job, and thanks for the follow on Instagram. Go Kings go. And that was Jakub in Slovakia. Those are some great names there. Obviously, Lubomir Wisnowski and Ziggy Palffy, but Josef Stumpel, Michael Hanzus, Zeus, the late great Pavel Demitra. There's a Kings fan I see a lot wearing a Kings Pavel Demitra jersey, which I always think is so cool. And Marian Gaborik, obviously, he was a huge part of the Cup run in 2014. So there are definitely some connections with the LA Kings and Slovakia. So thanks for checking in. Great to hear from a couple of international Kings fans. This one comes from Brian. We don't know if he's international. He didn't list where he's from, so he's in parts unknown. And if you do email, please include where you're from. I appreciate it. But Brian says, I recently hopped on the Kings wagon because I think this team has a real shot of taking the Cup this year. I'm going through some metrics for the season, and I'm really liking what I'm seeing. 3rd in goals percentage, 2nd in expected goals percentage, 5th in Corsi, 4th in Fenwick, 2nd in goals against, 3rd in goal differential, 1st and 2nd in expected goals against and expected goal differential, 1st in shots on goal against. Darcy Kemper's 3rd in save percentage and 2nd in average goals against and top 10 as a team. Not to mention Kempe and Fiala are just outside of the top 10 in goals. What am I missing here? Why isn't this team being talked about more? Also, could you go over any trade rumors or news, and also what you think they need to win the Cup? I'm really fascinated with this team, and I can't wait to see how the rest of the season plays out. Plus, I'm a gambler, so I do have some investments on futures. Thanks for your work, and thanks for reading. And again, that was from Brian in parts unknown. Well, since you're a gambler, FanDuel.com. What are you missing, you ask? Well, the Kings aren't exactly a sexy team. I think Adrian Kempe is vastly underrated around the NHL. Fiala hasn't been consistent. I think if Quentin Byfield was having a better year as far as his numbers, that would get the Kings more interest. And look, the Kings haven't won a playoff series since winning the Cup in 2014. They were 0-4 in their last 4 playoff appearances. So I think people justifiably have I'll believe it when I see it mentality right now when it comes with the LA Kings. I think that the Kings defense and goaltending is going to give them a puncher's chance in the postseason. But guys like Fiala and Byfield and Trevor Moore and Alex Laferriere, we got to have some somewhat consistent offense from those guys, I think, to have a real chance. As for any trades, we've kind of talked about it a lot off and on over the last week. We'll continue to talk about it going forward next week as well. But it's no secret what the Kings are looking for. They're looking for a right shot to help him as far as some offense and hopefully to help him on the power play as well. Frank in Ranchos Palos Verdes checks in. He says, my quarter century team would be, as he's checking in on the Kings quarter century team. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. He says, first team forwards, Ziggy Palffy, Andrzej Kopitar, and Dustin Brown. First team defense, Drew Doughty and Slava Voinov, and the goalie, Jonathan Quick. Second team, Justin Williams, Kempe, and Adam Deadmarsh. Defense, Willie Mitchell and Aaron Miller, and goalie, Felix Potvin. He also says, quick list of my 5 favorite games all time, favorite Kings games all time. We'll go in opposite order. Number 5, Game 7, 2014 against the Ducks. Number 4, the Frenzy on Figueroa. Number 3, 2014 Game 5 Cup win. Number 2, 2012 Game 6 Cup win. And number 1, drum roll, Miracle on Manchester. I wonder, Frank, if these games that you've attended, like the top 5 games you've attended, are just your top 5 Kings games of all time. I'm guessing it's just all time. So I will do a little bit of a humble brag here. 4 of your 5 games, and I agree with your list, by the way, if I was picking mine or the top 5 Kings games of all time, 4 of those 5 games I got to see in person. I was in Anaheim to see the Game 7 win. I saw both the Cup wins, and I was there as a fan for the Frenzy on Figueroa. Was not around for the Miracle on Manchester. That was a little bit before my time, but yeah, very interesting list for your quarter century team, and I got to agree with you on those top 5 Kings games of all time. We got an email here from Scott in Buena Park. He says, I know the next few weeks will be all about trades and what the Kings should do for this year's team's playoff run. And it's not like I do not see any value in making a trade for a rental right-handed forward. The question I ask myself is, will adding a right-handed forward make the Kings a Cup contender this year or next year? I do not. Teams like Edmonton, Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg still have an edge over the Kings in a 7-game series with or without a trade in the next 2 weeks. I believe the success of the Kings in this year's playoffs will come down to one line: Byfield, Fiala, and LaFerriere. How this line goes will be how the Kings go for the next 3 to 4 years. If they improve, the Kings will be relevant in the playoffs. And that is from Scott in Buena Park. Scott, I will agree with you that if we're all being honest with ourselves, likely any of the players we've talked about, even a Jonathan Marchessault or an Alex Tuck, likely doesn't make the Kings a cup contender. It certainly would help. And I think right now, if we're all being realistic, we're just looking to win that first round and then see what happens. But I do agree with you that line, especially Byfield and Fiala, if those guys can start to come through consistently offensively and be dangerous, it really makes the Kings a different team. So I will definitely agree with that. We have a few non-emails to share. We'll do that next here on Locked On LA Kings, your team every day. In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, World Series, and Stanley Cup Final. Same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from SelectQuote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. SelectQuote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. As one of America's leading insurance brokers with nearly 40 years of experience, they've helped over 2 million customers find $700 billion in coverage since 1985. What sets SelectQuote apart is their personal touch. Unlike brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed insurance agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. Go to selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. SelectQuote, they shop, you save. We did have a couple of non-emails that I wanted to include, and we had a couple people comment on YouTube about an emailer from last week's fan feedback show. That was John in Torrance, who had commented on Carlin Baith. His email complimented Carlin, but part of the email also was him talking about his experience in the media, and he had said he had seen some women get hired because of their looks. Some people did not like that email and thought that I should not have read it. This is the second time that John in Torrance has gotten some email reactions. And I'll just say, sometimes I have edited emails for time reasons, but I normally don't like to mess with the content of emails. I want you guys to be able to have your unfiltered say on things. Now, if something is really out of bounds, then obviously I would not read that email. If something was, ridiculously racist or sexist or homophobic or something like that. Now, that has not happened yet, and hopefully it won't. But I do also believe in freedom of speech and expression of ideas, and even unpopular ones. And you could say I'm a hypocrite for how I feel about booing the anthems. But I also believe that you guys have the right to disagree with anyone who emails the show or comment on YouTube. So I do appreciate the comments from Dow Dragon and Vlad Guerrero on YouTube. I'm guessing it's not really that Vlad Guerrero, but just a Vlad Guerrero fan. But thank you for your comments. I have heard your concerns, and we move forward. This came from a YouTube poster as well. This is from John Craig. And I had that prospects episode, and he had one word, Portillo, ? And John, you are 100% correct. I did not include goalie Eric Portillo from the Ontario Reign in our prospect recap, whatever you want to call it. That's a major omission on my part. Eric Portillo is definitely a major prospect for the Kings. I believe the Kings are going to have Eric Portillo as their number 2 goalie behind Darcy Kemper next season. And I think the number 1 veteran goalie in Ontario will be either David Riddick or Phoenix Copley. I think one of those guys will probably be let go. I think Eric Portillo has had plenty of AHL experience from this season, and he looked very solid in his NHL debut. I know it was only 1 game, but Darcy Kemper has been great this year. He is 34 years old. I think the Kings are looking to squeeze another year out of him next season. He is under contract for next year and the year after. My guess is that not next year, but the following year, they'll be looking to have Eric Portillo move from the number 2 goalie to the number 1 goalie and kind of put Kemper in that veteran backup role. Now, you don't really want to be paying your number 2 goalie over $5 million, which is what Kemper is making per season. But Eric Portillo is making less than $1 million, and he is signed through the next 2 coming seasons as well. So when you look at what the Kings could potentially be paying their 2 goaltenders, around $6 million is actually very affordable. So I think things will go along those lines. That's my prediction. Also, when you think of 2 years down the line, you'll have seen possibly Eric Portillo be the number 2 goalie, then the number 1 goalie, and then you can evaluate what he's like, how good he is. Is that a role he can go carry on in the future? And then by that time, you've had pretty much 2+ seasons of development from your prospects, Carter George and Hampton Slakinski. And then you can determine if one of those guys maybe is ready to be a backup. You would think in a couple of years' time, Carter George will probably be in his 2nd season in Ontario. And then depending on how long Hampton Slakinski stays in college at Western Michigan, he could be junior, senior year, something like that. And so then you kind of evaluate where your goaltending is at that point. But again, bottom line, Eric Portillo, definitely a major part of the Kings prospects and their future going forward for sure. Gollum checked in on X, and I don't know if he spelled it wrong or if I read it wrong last week, but he is not the chief of the Midwest. He is the chef of the Midwest. So it's Gollum, the chef from the Midwest, is checking in. And he says, I want to get the most out of Kempe and Fiala. Maybe it's time to shackle them together with Byfield. I think that we would put Fogle and Laferriere with Kopitar. You'd have Moore, Danault, and Turcotte, and then Jeannot, Hellenius, and Lewis to build around. Kopi still makes people around him better. The wingers would provide the outside speed, but also play at Kopi's strength of hanging on to pucks while dudes get open. Kevin and Juice would go crazy. Enough defensively there with Kempe and Byfield to not get caved in. And it pairs a trio of puck transporters together where they can all feed off each other's efforts. What do you think? And that was Gollum, the chef of the Midwest. Well, I would say, first of all, coming out of the Four Nations Faceoff, the only thing I'm kind of concerned about with the Kings is Kevin Fiala cooling off because he was so hot going into the break. But I think right now, if I'm Jim Hiller, I'm not doing anything to mess with Kevin Fiala. I want to see if he can continue to keep it going in this stretch run of the postseason. Now, if he has cooled off, if you need to change things up, I don't know that putting Fiala and Kempe together is a great idea. I think if you do that, then you have Fiala kind of reverting to being a setup guy. I think in his mind, he would want to set up Kempe too much. And I think we need Kevin Fiala to be a finisher, not a setup guy, not a distributor. So I think I'm in favor of keeping Fiala and Kempe separate. This comes from Ed in Brea, and Ed guaranteed that the USA would win the Four Nations Faceoff. He says, just wanted to say congrats to Drew Doughty and Canada winning the Four Nations to add another milestone to Doughty's Hall of Fame career. Odd for me to root against Doughty since I am an American. And then Ed went into his typical doom and gloom about the Kings. He said they were going to lose 4 of their next 5 games and end up missing the playoffs. So thank you for that, Ed. With your guarantees, that's a good thing. He continued, though, the only bright spot I look forward to seeing is if Kempe can surpass his career high in goals. I also think the Kings should consider trading for Tage Thompson instead of Alex Tuck. We would have to send someone back too. However, if we can get him and make it work, it would be a major upgrade. Go Kings, go always. That is Ed in Brea, who always predicts the Kings doom and gloom, but go Kings, go always. Don't ever change, Ed. I don't know why the Buffalo Sabres would trade Tage Thompson to the LA Kings. I mean, there's nobody that's untradeable, but like Tage Thompson is in his late 20s. He's the best player on that Sabres team, which stinks. So how could they make themselves better by trading away their best player? I mean, they would have to get a ridiculous windfall of players and picks and prospects or something to be able to trade that guy. So, I mean, yeah, it would be great for the Kings to get him, but why would they trade him? They are no interest in trading him. I don't think. As for Alex Tuck, again, we talked about it earlier. I think we can throw out these great names and these all-star players saying, yeah, that'd be great to have him on the Kings. But I think you also have to be a little bit realistic. I think Alex Tuck is a realistic target for the Kings. I don't think that Tage Thompson is. Thank you to everyone who took the time to email, to comment on YouTube, and to send a message on X. This show is literally not possible without your participation. Before we wrap up the show, I have to give a shout out and best wishes to friend of the show, Jesse Cohen, who's been a guest multiple times on this show. He announced earlier today on social media that he has stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Obviously, I want to wish all the best to Jesse in making a quick and speedy recovery. If you are on X or Twitter and maybe you didn't see that post, I'm sure he would appreciate any positive comments you have for him. And a lot of Kings fans have already messaged him and wished him well and sending him love. Those types of things, they help. Any kind of encouragement certainly helps people. And anyone out there that's listening, I have a really good friend, Mark Crawford, no, not the former Kings coach, who's battling cancer right now. And anyone listening that's fighting that fight as well, wish you the best. It's a terrible disease. It's touched so many good people. And again, Jesse, I want to wish you all the best in your fight. A lot of Kings fans have you in their thoughts and prayers, and certainly I do as well. All right. If you want to get an email for our next fan feedback show or anything else you want to share, the email address is lockedoneddie@gmail.com, EDDIE. Leave your comments in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube as well. I am trying my best to do a better job of interacting with you guys. I hope you've noticed that. If you want to stay interactive on social media, X, Twitter, Instagram, we're at Locked On LA Kings, and we're now on TikTok. I have no clue how to use TikTok, so there's going to be a lot of trial and error with that. But we're at Locked On LA Kings now on TikTok as well. All right, for your everydayers, those of you that listen and watch Locked On LA Kings every day, coming up on Saturday's show, we have a Kings game to talk about. We have the Kings back in action against the Utah Hockey Club. Excited to see the Kings getting back on the ice. Excited to get to talk about a Kings game, which we will do with our show after the conclusion of tomorrow's game. So a late night Saturday record and broadcast for you guys. It's a 6 p.m. face-off LA time. You can watch it on the FanDuel Sports Network locally, ESPN Plus nationally, and you can listen to it on the 710 ESPN app. Looking forward to that. And I'll be out at the game on Saturday. So if you're out there and you want to say hi, let me know. I'm Eddie Garcia. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching this episode of Locked On LA Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you on Saturday. And as always, go Kings, go.